Hello everyone and welcome to this new edition of Business Africa. I'm India Yunka. Here are the top stories. The 8th edition of the TICAD, the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, established in 1993 between Japan and the African continent, was concluded on Sunday in Tunisia with the announcement of Japan's support of $30 billion for project financing on the African continent. In Nigeria, the steady rise in the cost of drugs is contributing to the traffic of counterfeit pharmaceuticals on the market, thereby putting the population at risk. And finally, in the DRC, the rise in the value of the dollar is having a positive impact on the diamond market. In the first half of the year, the export of the precious stones were estimated at $82,650,000. Representatives of nearly 48 countries met in the Tunisian capital for the 8th edition of TICAD. Japan intends to support a development led by Africans themselves. In 2 days, no less than 82 projects worth $2.7 billion were presented.
The Japanese government has announced the support of nearly $30 billion for project financing in Africa. This sum is to be invested in human capital, the green economy, and the improvement of living conditions of African populations over a period of 3 years. Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida made the announcements during the 8th edition of the Tokyo International Conference on African Development, TICAD. Mr. Kishida reiterated the Japanese government's commitment to security and development in Africa. At the conference, which brought together some 30 heads of state and government in Tunisia, the Japanese Prime Minister spoke out in favor of aid to support African countries. The Asian power said it wants to redefine its approach with a new model of collaboration between Tokyo and Africa, particularly by focusing on human resources to achieve an African society that is agile and more resilient to crisis. The implementation of this redesigned collaboration, however, remains to be seen. TICAD was launched in 1993 by the government of Japan to promote Africa's development, peace and security through the strengthening of relations in multilateral cooperation and partnerships.
To discuss more on the partnership, the Cabinet Secretary for Public Affairs for Prime Minister's Office of Japan joins us. Hello, Mr. Noriyuki Shiketa. Thanks for accepting to do this interview. The first Tokyo International Conference on African Development took place almost 30 years ago. The Japan-African relationship has evolved enormously between development aid and economic collaborations. How does this redesigned partnership look in the current geopolitical climate?
So Japan launched TICAD in 1993 and has continued to work hard in the spirit of supporting sustainable development of Africa. At this year's TICAD 8, Japan renewed this commitment and conveyed the message that we will continue to promote new initiatives focused on people as a partner growing together. This approach by Japan has proven effective in light of the current global situation. The global spread of COVID-19 has reaffirmed the value of ensuring human security centered on people. In light of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, which caused a food security crisis for many African countries, Japan decided to provide US $300 million in co-financing with the African Development Bank to support the food production in Africa. I believe TICAD will continue to be vital in promoting sustainable development of Africa, especially given the current geopolitical climate.
During the summit, Japan pledged nearly $30 billion in funding for projects in Africa. How does your country intend to implement this pledge?
Let me just touch upon 4 points based on Prime Minister Kishida's announcement at TICAD 8. Number one is the launch of US $4 billion Japan's Green Growth Initiative with Africa, focusing on green growth in Africa. Number two is creation of investment fund for startups of over 10 billion yen, which are provided by the Japanese business community to support startups. Number three is human resource development of 300,000 professionals in Africa. And lastly, US $5 billion in cooperation with African Development Bank for the comprehensive development of the private sector. So now more Japanese companies are keenly interested in supporting startups, green investments, and investment to foster talents, especially younger generation.
Prime Minister Fumio Kishida pledged to strengthen its partnership with Africa. Does this involve a new approach to develop aid for heavily indebted countries on the continent?
Yes, Japan has been proactively supporting the private sector of Africa through enhanced private sector assistance for Africa program. We are worried that some of distorting development finance coming from certain non-OECD donors could damage sustainable development. We need to ensure transparency of development finance. Quality of infrastructure is also vital. So in response to the so-called debt trap that the number of African countries have been suffering from, Japan established a special framework of maximum $1 billion. This framework aims to support African countries' efforts to improve debt transparency and sustainability by supporting those countries that are promoting reforms, including debt consolidation.
Japanese companies have very advanced technologies, but so far the transfer of these technologies with Africa is still pending. Under the fifth phase of the enhanced private sector assistance in Africa, can we expect partnership in this sector?
At TCAD 8, Japan decided to implement this non-sovereign loans phase 8, and the Japanese government strongly hopes that this initiative will increase the number of Japanese companies engaging with African companies and counterparts, strengthen partnerships in the technology field, and revitalize the transfer of advanced Japanese technologies to African countries. As I mentioned, more and more Japanese companies are interested in investing in technology sectors. We are impressed by growing startups in African countries.
Mr. Shikata, thanks for your insightful contribution.
Well, thank you very much.
Africa's most populous country is facing challenges from the counterfeit market. Nigeria's inflation rate has reached 19.64%, its highest level in 17 years. And the price of basic medication is so high that many are unable to access needed care.
Nigeria is faced with challenge of the counterfeit market as a developing country, losing thousands of citizens and revenues annually to fake drugs. The industry estimates that trade in counterfeit pharmaceuticals globally is worth up to $200 billion annually, with Africa among the regions mostly affected. According to medical experts, some of the health issues ranging from loss of sight and hearing defects, as well as kidney and liver issues, are caused by substandard drugs.
These medications compromise patient care in the sense that they may cause the disease to progress. Instead of a medication that is supposed to take care of a disease and reduce its impact, because it is not genuine and fake, then the disease is not abated, it progresses. Another thing is that it can cause adverse reactions.
Most streets in Nigeria have medicine merchants, popularly known as chemists, in various corners dispensing drugs at will, even without certification. The National Agency for Quality Control estimates that at least 17% of drugs in the market are substandard. However, there are few or no alternatives for the people. The latest report from the National Bureau of Statistics also showed that inflation at its highest level in July, when it accelerated to 19.6%, up from 18.6% in June.
And the DRC export in carat in the first half of this year are lower than the previous year. But the value of export has increased by $17 million, a feat generated by the rising US dollar.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, diamond exports in the first half of 2022 have risen and are estimated at $82.6 million, an increase of 26.23% compared to 2021. According to data published by the country's Technical Coordination and Mining Planning Unit, gemstone exports amounted to 6.2 million carats in the first half of the current year. Compared to the statistics for the first half of 2021, when exports amounted to 6.3 million carats and were worth $65.4 million, there was a 2.30% drop. But while exports fell slightly, their value increased by $17 million due to the rise in the US currency. Although conditions are precarious, diamond mining is estimated at 51.86% compared to 48.05% for industrial production. Most of the diamonds produced in the DRC come from small-scale production, according to statistics from the Ministry of Mines. In 2021, 71% of Congolese diamonds came from non-industrial production. Last June, at least 6 people died in a mine collapse.
This is the end of this edition of Business Africa. The information continues on our various platforms and on africanews.com.